All righty. Waiting for just a couple more folks to get their audio set up and we will get started. Okay. Welcome everyone. It is 9 a.m. in the morning on opening week, so we are so happy that you chose to join this breakout session for the redesign pilot for program review. My name is Shauna Freeman. I am currently the Interim Associate Dean for Student Learning and Success, and I'm also a business faculty member. And I'm joined today by Brock Grubb, who is a consultant who's worked with Highline really closely on a number of different projects over the last couple of years. Brock, I'll give him an opportunity to introduce himself in a few slides. But Brock and I are really excited to share with you all some of the redesign and what that includes, as well as why it was important to center racial equity and improvement in our program review process.
Turn it off.
But before we kind of jump into this session, we thought it would be fun to have a little warm up. So let's take a moment to, do these instructions. It's brief activity. Per the slide, please rename yourself in Zoom to a short intention for this academic year, maybe between 3 to 4 words. And I'm going to do it too.
How do I change this?
We are taking just a couple of moments to rename ourselves to something that is a short intention that you have for this upcoming year. I'm super excited, but I know I'm anxious, and I try to use that to my advantage. So, keeps me on my P's and Q's, I'll say that. Let's see. Surviving and enjoying my life. I love that. Self-care, supported. I want my students to feel, it's kind of cutting off successful, I think. Encouragement, big patience, empowered and safe, student success, well-being, forward thinking. Submit my assessment reports. I'm right there with you, Jen. Okay, it's even hard for me. Ease, grace, empowered. I love it. If anyone else wants to change theirs, I absolutely love this. Supportive, yes.
Yeah, and folks are saying that they're having trouble changing their name on their phone. So if you want, feel free to just put in the chat too.
Yes, yes. There we go. All right. Grace with self and others. Yes, definitely. Grace and focus. I love this. Thank you all so much. I tend to think we're all sort of kind of in similar spaces, but it's nice to actually be able to share that with
It's
others.
actually kind of a cool activity she just did on Zoom on this person.
Hey, Derlin.
Hi, sorry, I wasn't muted. It's a cool
No
activity.
worries. That's good feedback. Thank you. So now that we kind of oriented ourselves in sort of this space and have been able to share, Shane, thanks for the 2 minutes late. That's probably me all the time. So thanks for that. I'm right there with you. Let's sort of transition to talking a little bit about program review, which I know, right, is super interesting, but we hope it will be, because we're moving in a direction that I think is really positive for the college. I mean, last year we made a lot of progress, and we'll share on that. But let's go ahead and kind of talk about situating program review, like where have we come from and where are we sort of going? And so this is sort of a quick, brief timeline of what program review has sort of looked like at Highline College. So, the first era, and I'm constantly always thinking of sort of different eras of things, but the first era of program review was really just focused on prof tech. It was something that did not traditionally include transfer programs. The document or the guide itself was only 1 page, didn't have a lot of detail, allowed for a lot of variation in terms of what people would report on. And it was only initiated when typically when administrators felt there was deep improvements that needed to be made with a program. It often sort of the expectation was if someone was going through program review, there was something wrong with the department, and that carries a very negative connotation. So era 2 was a big transition for us, which started in 2019 of the development of a new campus-wide process that would include transfer and prof tech programs. And so that guide was based on some documents from Whatcom Community College that had a really robust guidance document that would really allow the programs to go through a deep dive into their data, to have more structure in general compared to what we had before. And then it offered the expectation of a regular 5-year schedule, which is something we revised heavily to sort of fit the needs of Highline. But after we had our first round, we found that there were some areas for improvement. And oftentimes you can never sort of see or find those things until you've actually implemented. So it was sort of an awesome opportunity. Oh wow. Okay. It was an awesome opportunity to be able to see sort of, okay, what's really working and what can we improve on. And we found that a redesign would be really beneficial because we wanted to center racial equity. It's something that is important to the college. It's important to all of our departments, to us, I think, individually. And so it was an opportunity to focus on that, but also incorporate some continuous improvement tools. And Brock's going to share a little more on that because he's an expert in that area. But then also, how do we integrate it into our Highline structures so that it's something that is continuous and isn't an add-on as much as just a part of what we always do. So again, why kind of put all this focus on program review? Well, one of the biggest benefits is that, this provides a recurring space for departments to really talk about student success. And it does so in a way, sort of regardless of the current status of a program, and hopefully catches, things before they get to a point where, again, in the past, there would sort of be this intervention by administration. If we're always continuously improving our departments on a systematic basis, we would catch things that might be problematic and might linger for years. And again, the opportunity to really strengthen bias towards action and not having so many periods of planning, but actually implementing things, which also meant reducing sort of the length of our action cycles. And then increasing capacity for departments, and we'll share a little bit about that part. But one of the things we also realized in the previous iteration, the one we introduced last year, is that it did require a lot of time and energy and heavy lifting by departments, oftentimes by coordinators. And so part of what we're hoping to do is alleviate some of that strain and sort of spread some of that for capacity. So now sort of,
I'm so sorry to cut you off. So yesterday when we were talking to Dr. Mosby, my mic was on and he called me and I felt bad, but there are a couple of people here, mic on, So if please, you can turn it off.
Oh,
So because,
okay.
yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I'm so sorry. Let me double check.
No, so it's just like because I went through it, so.
Under
Oh,
loud.
okay.
Felt so bad.
Got it. Got it. Thank you. And I have like different screens going on right now, kind of back in the office. And so it's
Yeah,
like
program discipline review, improvement process for the student success.
muting a lot of different. All right. I'll be on top of that more closely now. Thanks, Rasmir.
Thank you.
All right. So I will hand it over to Brock and allow him to introduce himself and some of the work that inspires him as well.
Yeah, thanks, Shauna. My name's Brock Grubb, codename Listen to Students today. By the way, feel free to change your name back at any point. That was really just a warm-up exercise. I'm going to keep mine because I think it's kind of cool. So I'm Brock. I'm a consultant. I live and work out of my basement in Beacon Hill in Seattle. And I do work that is primarily local and primarily focused in high schools and colleges and the transition from high school to college. My background, I'm a former high school English teacher. I came to Seattle initially to get a public policy degree or public administration degree at the University of Washington. I've worked in philanthropy and research over the years, and I've been independent for the last 7 years. And I've really enjoyed my partnership with Highline College, working closely with Shauna on this work, and then working closely with a couple of you on the call on other projects and other work. So really thrilled to be here today. Just as a reminder, please keep your mics muted if you're not speaking, just to limit feedback on the call. Thank you so much. So we are going to talk at you for a little bit longer, and then we're going to get to the breakout discussion, which is really where we want to focus today, is sort of the breakouts and then the debrief from them. So I'm going to take us through just a little bit of some thinking, just a little bit of the thinking about how this process is different, the program improvement process that Shauna and I have been working on. So Shauna, if you want to go ahead and click through to the next. Thank you so much. So first off, there are really 3 overarching frameworks that we're drawing inspiration from in this process. And these are likely books that are familiar to many of you on the call, but just to kind of center and ground this work. First, we do take anti-racism very seriously. We take racial equity very seriously. We know this is work that the college has been doing, that many of you have been doing in your classrooms within your departments for a very long time. But that really is the first priority lens that we bring into this work and really draw on the work of Ibram Kendi and others as an inspiration for how we sort of think about this work as a point of departure. The second framework is improvement science or continuous improvement, which many of you may be familiar with. It sort of has its origins in private industry, in auto manufacturing, but the ideas and tools were imported first into healthcare, and those have been put to broad use within the United States and other countries. And then more recently, these tools have been used in educational settings. And Tony Breik, who, up until very recently was president of the Carnegie Foundation for the Advancement of Teaching, he and his team have really done a lot of pioneering work to get these tools implemented broadly in educational settings. And so we borrow from those, shamelessly steal tools from them, and try to integrate that thinking wherever we can. The third and final one is kind of a spiritual text for us, but it's this emergent strategy concept, and is sort of popularized by Adrienne Marie Brown, but really, kind of thinking about change not as a linear process, but as something that is nonlinear, that is iterative, that is adaptive, that sometimes doesn't move at the speed that we want it to move, but that is really important that we tend to the sort of organic nature of the change that you all are trying to do in your classrooms and in your departments. So you'll see threads of that kind of woven throughout some of the work that we're doing here, but just wanted to share that first and foremost. On the next slide, we sort of outline what we see as some of the key principles. These are draft, like a lot of things in this process. We're very much approaching this in an iterative way. We've piloted this with one department, with legal studies. We're about to implement with 3 more departments this quarter, but we're always learning and we're always revising what we're doing. But these are sort of some of the key principles. I won't read through all of them. I do just want to draw attention maybe to a couple of them. One is really this piece on it's all about relationships and really centering the relationships that you all have with your students in your setting, as well as the relationships that you have with your peers. That is the site of transformation. And that is really where we're trying to, center that experience and center those interactions in this work, rather than sort of prioritizing, higher level system or administrative conversations. It's all related, of course, because policy change needs to be part of this as well. But we start with students and their interactions with faculty and staff. The second one that I maybe draw attention to is inch wide, mile deep. And one of the things that's hardest about using continuous improvement or improvement science tools is that they ask us to be very, very specific about what we're trying to change. And that often involves doing very small things at the beginning. But for those of us who've worked in education or around education for a long time, you're familiar, of course, with the sort of set of 6 or 7 priorities that we're asked to implement as departments, or that we're asked to implement as educators at any one time. And improvement science really pushes back on that concept and says, it's not possible to do that many things at a high level of quality. If you want to succeed, really focus deeply on 1, maybe 2 things. And as you start to see changes coming from those, then you can start to think about spreading that and maybe moving on to other priority areas. So anyway, you can kind of glance through some of the other ones. These are all in the program improvement documents that we'll be sharing with you all as well. But Sean, if you want to move on to the next slide. So this is sort of a visual that at the highest level summarizes the sort of continuous improvement methodology. And I also just want to draw your attention to the quote across the top. This is sort of central to continuous improvement thinking. All improvement requires change, but not all changes lead to improvement. All improvement requires change, but not all changes lead to improvement. And so at the heart of continuous improvement, and at the heart of improvement science, is trying to understand which changes are actually leading to the improvement that we're after: increases in student success, increases in racial equity. And to do that, we have to really focus and we have to really isolate individual changes so that we can understand those relationships more deeply. So there's sort of 3 motivating questions across the top. What specifically are we trying to accomplish? What changes might we introduce and why? And how will we know if that change has led to an improvement? And that's where the sort of concept of feedback loops comes in, making sure that we're gathering information about what we're witnessing in our classroom. And then down below is the plan, do, study, act cycle. And this is familiar to many of you. It was a part of the previous program review process. But this notion of, carefully developing a strategy, trying it, gathering information about whether or not it worked, and then using that information to make some kind of tweak or modification to make your next implementation even stronger. So again, just kind of a high level framework meant to sort of orient you to the basic schema of the work that we're trying to do through this revised process. So a couple of specific tools, and these are not invented by Shauna and me. These are things that are field tested through continuous improvement methodologies. We're borrowing these specific tools from the New York City Department of Education that invested a ton of effort and a ton of resource to develop a handbook that we are now shamelessly copying and importing into the Highline College process. The first tool that I wanted to just share with you it's called empathy mapping, but it's really a tool that is meant to center student experiences and is meant to force us as educators and as education professionals to question the assumptions that we make about what students are actually experiencing in our classrooms. And there are several different ways to do this. Thankfully, there's sort of step-by-step guidance for each of these, but you can conduct short semi-structured interviews with students. You can shadow your students to actually watch how they interact with the process or interact with the tool that you're trying to encourage interaction with. You can ask students to self-document, to write down what they think about a process or what they think about a strategy that you're trying to deploy. And then you can try it yourself. You can actually go through the process. A classic example here, and this is from the Carnegie Foundation for the Advancement of Teaching, where they actually went through the college placement process at several colleges as educators just so that they could understand and sort of build empathy with what students are actually experiencing as they go through those kinds of processes. And there are many ways that you could sort of try from a student lens different things. So this is one tool. And again, we have some guidance that we provide as a part of this program improvement process, but there are other tools that we can point you to. But this notion of, yes, bring your professional knowledge, and yes, bring your own experience, and yes, bring the best available research literature to your work. But it is essential that we also center the voices and the experiences of the students that you're working with. Many of you already do this, so this may not feel new to you, but it is something that we want to sort of encourage, more regular and more consistent application of these kinds of tools. And then the second tool, which again may be familiar to several of you, is a fishbone diagram. Fairly simple graphic organizer. The purpose of this tool, as it says on the left, is really to explode a problem and to break it into its component parts. These are really, really fun to do with a group of people. If you have a problem that several educators or several folks in your department are facing, situating that problem on the left in that box, and then just brainstorming. You can do this with sticky notes and then organize them. What are the root causes? What are the things that are driving this problem? And you'll start out with many, many things, but then you start to categorize and organize them into different categories. And eventually you sort of see the larger levers, and you're able to sort of situate your change process focused on one or more of those root causes rather than the presenting problem. So again, it's a way to sort of help explode a problem and understand the different factors that may be driving it. This is another tool that we're trying to implement through this revised program improvement process. So that's a really high level sort of drive through. Sean, if you want to go on to the next slide.
Yes.
No worries.
Oh.
It's all good. We're moving to the breakout, so I can also just set that up. So that's a really high level sort of, really high level overview of how this process is situated at the college, which Shauna sort of shared, the history of program improvement, why program review is such an important site for experimentation, and then some of the kind of principles and thinking and tools that we're incorporating into this process. But now we really want to open it up and invite you all to kind of jump in and to start using some of this thinking and some of this framing. And so Shauna is currently creating breakout groups with the folks in the session. And let me just say a little bit about how we're thinking we'll use this time. And we should have about 15 minutes for the breakout group discussions. We may actually be able to spare as much as 20 minutes for this. But at the heart of continuous improvement and improvement science is the problem statement. And so for each effort, the first thing that a team is meant to do is to develop a really clear and compelling problem statement. And they use information from a variety of sources to arrive at that problem statement. And then that becomes the thing that they organize themselves around to try to address through a series of trials, the sort of plan, do, study, act cycle that we discussed earlier. So for today, we're gonna give you a problem statement to react to. And I'll just go ahead and read this. Faculty and staff at our college do not do enough to help new students develop a sense of belonging in the first few weeks of the quarter. Regardless of whether or not this is true, or you believe this to be true at Highline College, we don't want to get into a debate around whether or not that's true. We would like to do this as sort of an experiment, or just sort of in a hypothetical situation. So imagine that that is true at Highline College. And again, Shauna and I are not indicting anyone on this call, and we don't necessarily subscribe to that, but let's assume for a minute that that is true. How could we address that? What are some changes that you all might make within the first couple of weeks of the quarter to address that problem? And so for this, we just want to introduce this term, which is change idea. And so in order to address a problem, and this is improvement science or continuous improvement jargon, you introduce a change idea, which is an intervention or a tweak to the way that you work. These are small things that you could try out by next Thursday is sort of the shorthand. So you can try this out within a week or two. Not something that you need a long-term planning process and you have to overhaul policies within the department. This is something that you as an individual can just try out with students to address the problem of students not developing a strong sense of belonging at the beginning of the quarter. And so when we go to our breakout groups, there are really two prompts. One is, what are some small things, some small tweaks that you could make in your practice that could help students develop a stronger sense of belonging, and new students in particular? So thinking of students who are coming to Highline for the very first time. And the second piece of this, how could you measure the results? And how would you go about sort of analyzing them either by yourself or with a group of peers? So again, what are some small tweaks that you could make to your practice, hypothetically, at the beginning of a quarter, to help new students develop a sense of belonging? And how would you gather information to help you understand whether or not you had done that, whether or not they felt like they belonged, whether or not they feel more connected to the college in some way? So the thought is we'll go and discuss this in groups. We'll come back together as a full group. We'll share out what we developed. And then as a takeaway from today, you'll each leave with a set of ideas that you could trial in your first couple of weeks with any new students that you're interacting with at the college. So again, we'll do small groups, come back as a full group, and then we'll go from there. Shauna, anything else before we break?
No, I think I finally got my computer to work just in time. So no, go ahead and into your rooms, and Brock and I will sort of make the rounds just in case you have any questions. To see smiling faces, my hope is that that means your session, your breakout sessions were fruitful and engaging and all those kinds of things. One of the things that Brock and I wanted to share is a little jam board that you know, we can use to kind of give feedback, sort of debrief on some of the things that you guys came up with in terms of ideas. So feel free to click on the link that I just put in the chat. Brock, did you want to share anything else before folks maybe start typing in?
You know, I guess I'll just say, yeah, so Shauna and I both shared the link. Sorry, I didn't realize you already shared it. Yeah, so, you know, the idea here is to kind of do a harvest from the small group conversations that you were just in. So, you know, just add a post-it. If you just click on the left, you can add a post-it and just capture a change idea that came out of your conversation. So some small trialable thing that you could do in the first couple weeks of your work with students, or sort of a measurement approach. We had a really robust conversation in my group about like, well, how would you even go about understanding whether or not students do feel a sense of belonging or do feel a sense of community? So feel free to share that out as well. And then I guess the third thing would just be other reflections from this conversation. And so feel free to just populate with Post-it notes. We'll kind of categorize and things later. And again, this is going to be kind of a takeaway for you all from today's conversation so that you have some actionable ideas to try out in the first couple of weeks.
Awesome. Thanks, Brock. And yeah, thanks for the reminder, Lauren. Please make sure everyone's muted because we kind of get that feedback loop going on. If not, I will also open up the Jamboard and kind of share what folks are popping in so far.
And Shauna, you can also stop screen share if you want so we can just
sure. Yeah.
see each other.
Yes.
fuck just happened to my, there we go.
Yeah. The Post-it notes have a tendency to stack up on each other. So feel free, if you're not seeing yours, it's probably showing up in the top left, and then you can drag it out from there.
Someone else's? What?
I'm just going to narrate a little bit of what I'm seeing here. First, I'm kind of seeing some stuff that's just related to conversation with students. Like a lot of times we think of measurement as stuff that shows up in, you know, administrative data of enrollment, persistence, completion. But really, measurement can also just involve like qualitatively asking students how it's going. And it's okay if you can't do that for all students. Just having a few focused conversations can make a huge difference. Organizing meetings with students, which can be time intensive, but can also really have a lot of long-term benefit of forming that individual connection with students. I'm not sure if it's on here yet, but someone in my breakout group talked about doing what they called an identity circle and sort of modeling how you as an educator think about your identity, whether that's race, ethnicity, gender identity, other identities that we carry with us, visually mapping that and then inviting students to do that too and to connect to each other around that. So actually this was a graded assignment that this person was sharing, where the sort of first thing that they do is just talk about themselves and make connections with other students who share their identities. Shauna, curious if you're seeing anything that you want to reflect on here.
If you don't mind, I can just go ahead and share it because I'm kind of toggling back and forth between the two. I wanted to just share there are some sort of common threads, I think, in terms of just trying to connect with students, similar to what you were saying, you know, through building community and being more vulnerable with students. So sort of giving that, giving students the opportunity to connect with us sort of on a person-to-person level, I think makes a big difference. And I'm kind of seeing that in a lot of different ways. Also the measurement piece. So folks are really, I think, excited to use some of the tools that we've kind of maybe discovered a lot more through technology, like using more surveys for students, you know, even through a Google form, or, you know, just if we haven't used those in Canvas before, but getting student feedback through technology, I think is really helpful too. And so I'm kind of seeing that common thread as well. And one of the pieces about, you know, measuring, that's one of the things that, similar to what Brock said, you know, that dimming wheel that we've always looked at so much in assessment is still a big part of program review. It's just sort of scaled out much larger, right, amongst an entire department. And so the idea of constantly planning things, trying new things, you know, reflecting on that and then doing something is fully, and I think deeply embedded in this particular iteration of the redesign. And so you guys doing these sort of small little tests are exactly what we hope to see everyone doing constantly with the program review after you've sort of done the larger scale version, you know, always doing those little tests just like this as a department, as, you know, individuals, to slowly make change that we know can help students be more successful.
So yeah, I'm just looking at the clock. We will share a link to this Jamboard. I'm not sure how follow-up is happening from these sessions, but we'll find a way to share this. And Shauna, we should also share the link to the program improvement toolkit as it currently stands in draft form.
Yes. We'll do
so
that. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go for it. I was just gonna ask you to go there. So go for it.
Yeah, we'll share all these links. Definitely the Jamboard too, if you want to come back and refer to some of the ideas that you saw from your colleagues, or kind of just as reminders about you know, what we all could do. But this quote is really powerful that brought to my attention, but I think it sort of embodies everything that we're hoping to do. So everything we attempt, everything we do is either growing up as its roots go deeper, or it's decomposing, leaving its lessons in the soil for the next attempt. I think in so many ways that represents what we do on a daily basis in our classrooms, right? We're either trying to make things grow, or we're taking those lessons learned, if it didn't go the way that we hoped, to try again, right? We make assignments and we think maybe it'll work, you know, maybe it doesn't, but we learn something. That's always the goal for program review as well. And so it's constant iteration, it's constant learning. And as educators, you know, in a lot of ways, I think that's exciting for us. So last thing we want to say before we leave, it's 10 o'clock. Thank you guys so much for attending this session. You know, everyone will be going through program review at some point. So if you have questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I consult with Brock on a lot of different things. And so if you want more information on the tools that he's used, some of the books that he listed, we can certainly share that with you as well. But thank you so much for attending this session.
Thank you, Shauna.
Thank you, Shauna. Thanks, Brock.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.
Hey,
Thank
Shauna.
you.